Hi everybody, how are you guys doing today? My name is Mariah Payne and I'm going to wait a little bit for everybody to get on the live. But today's discussion is going to be about what's been going on in the world. So everything that's been going on the past few days since Memorial Day has been weighing in a lot on people's hearts, especially mine being a black woman. So a lot of this discussion is going to be focused around racism, police brutality, and discrimination. So it is a difficult conversation to have and a very complex conversation, but I'm going to try to do that in 25 minutes as well as get your questions down below. So if you do have a question, please use the letter Q and then put a semicolon after it or a colon. That way I know that it's a question and it'll stick out. And if I have time at the end, I will be able to answer all your questions. But a little bit about me. I am a pageant girl, which is why I am on Pageant Planet. So that is how I was able to get on the live. And I was asked last minute to jump in on here to discuss this conversation about racism and police brutality and discrimination by Pageant Planet as well as by Body by Craig. So thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be on here and that you guys trust me enough to have this conversation. Although it is difficult and uncomfortable, we are going to have it and it is something that is need to have. That is the first step to combating these issues, is to first be able to sit down and to have a collective dialogue about this difficult conversation. So one of the things that I've been asked throughout this whole thing, not only on Facebook but in person, is why is this happening now? Why is it such a big issue? Racism doesn't exist. There's so many frequently asked questions that I just decided, you know what, why don't we just do a live and talk about it and just have a dialogue and a discussion so we can just get that conversation started and people will start to feel a little bit more comfortable with having these conversations, although it's not going to be comfortable. So the first question that I was asked was, why is this happening right now? It's happening right now because we have technology more so than ever before. We are able to utilize it at our fingertips, whether it be at home or somewhere at work or just on the go. And because we have access to that now, we are able to see things more so than we have in the past. And that is why this is such a huge conversation, because that incident was caught on camera and the police officer that did do that to George Floyd is now arrested, of course, but it went viral all over social media. And the whole reason why that this went viral this time is because of how brutal the situation was and the fact that he died. So with that being said, how do we solve this issue? What kind of conversations do we have? Who do I reach out to is what a lot of people have been asking me. So I have been answering a lot of questions in my DMs and in my PMs on Facebook. And it's really just getting the conversation started. So starting within your local community, whether that be with your family members or your friends, but also to make sure that they're implementing these different values and mission statements at your employer. That's just one of the many ways that you can do it. But at the end of this live, I will be going into different steps to what you can implement in your everyday life to help stop racism, police brutality, and discrimination. So a little bit about me. I am a full-time banker. I have been doing that for a little over a year now, but I've been in customer service for about 10 years. I compete in pageants, which is why I'm on here with Pageant Planet. I also model part-time, but I am the oldest out of my dad's 10 children on my dad's side, but then I'm the oldest girl and the second to oldest on my mom's side. So with that being said, there has been a lot of things within my personal life and in my family's life that has affected me and the people around me because of racism that I've had happen. My mom moved us from the west side of Cleveland to Brunswick in 2003, and that was probably the best decision that she could have made for our family, because it has shown me the differences in those two worlds, being in the inner city schools versus being in the suburban schools. And let me just tell you, there is a huge difference. When I moved from Cleveland to Brunswick, I did have to get extra help in order to be able to be on the same page and be on the same schedule as the kids that were around me in class. So with that, there is just some different topics and issues that have to go into this that is very complex. When we moved here, it wasn't all positive in terms of my race. I remember walking down the street as a 10-year-old and just someone yelling the N-word at me, and I didn't understand why. I was with my friend at the time, who was also white, and we were confused, like, what did that have anything to do with us? But this is what we live, this is the world that we live in, and the nation that we continue to still live in 2020, and this is why we need to have this conversation to keep this conversation going in order for us to combat these issues that we have. And the reason why it's so complex and so uncomfortable is because there's a lot of it that has to do with psychology and the product of the environment that you are around, as well as the emotional intelligence. So before you have these conversations with other people, you want to be able to make sure that you have the emotional intelligence to be able to keep a dialogue and make sure that it's not an argument, but that it's an actual conversation and a discussion. So before I got on this live, I actually had a random conversation with my apartment manager, and he asked me questions like, why are we focusing on the white officer doing that to George Floyd, and why are we not focusing on issues that are going on within our country? And the reason why we are focusing on this now is because this is a huge platform that we need to address inside of our racial community and inside the Black community, about racism, police brutality, and also discrimination. And yes, there are other things that we need to focus on within this country, but right now the main focus is racism, police brutality, and also discrimination. So there are a few things that I wrote down that I wanted to go over that were going to be something that I would talk about at the end. And if you guys have any questions, please leave it down in there, and that way I can get back to it at the end or even throughout this conversation so I can answer it. I see it there. Okay. So with that, the thing that I like to start off conversations with is just getting to know how they view this perspective on racism. What is their take on police brutality, and what is their take on discrimination? So you can't just jump into a conversation full-fledged defense mode. It's usually never going to end well. When I had this conversation with this other person, he could tell that I was open to the discussion, and he can tell with my tone that I was ready and not going to judge him for the questions that he had. And that was probably the main key factor with this, is that I wasn't going to judge him for the questions, although they could be offensive to me, and some of them were a little bit offensive. But for me to just go and jump into defense mode and start yelling at him, and it wasn't going to solve anything. And that's when I realized that this is a bigger issue, and that you also need to remain calm and keep your tone when you talk about these different complex conversations. So when he was talking to me, we spoke about what was going on, and I told him my opinions on it, but also to the stats and the facts. And he didn't realize that the facts were Black people, Black men especially, are 20% more likely to have tougher crimes on the same crimes as white men. And another comment that someone said was that more white people get killed than Black people. And this is true, but that is because white people make up majority of the population in the United States. White people make up about 70 to 72%. and black people aren't even second to that. It's actually Hispanics, and then thirdly, black people make up the population, which I believe is about 13 or 14%. So the fact that he gave those stats that white people are killed more than black people was great, but it also made my point even more, because black people were second to that under white people, and white people have about 70 to 72% of the population here, and black people are about 13 to 14%. So the fact that those numbers were that close made the point and made it obvious that there was some inequality going on within our nation, and just systematic racism going on within the country as well. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of posts, and it's great seeing these posts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, but the real thing is you really need to put your money where your mouth is, and not only just donate to these causes, but also you need to make sure that you're putting in the work. What are you going to do to help this situation? What are you going to do to combat these issues that we have going on in our nation? Racism, police brutality, discrimination. What are you doing to help the situation? So yes, you are putting out these stats that more white people are getting killed than black people, except the difference is that white people make up 70% of the population and black people only make up 14 to 13%. You also need to make sure that when you're putting those stats that your intentions are good and that you're looking to help the situation. And if your intentions are to help the situation, what are your intentions? Your intentions need to be to make our country greater, since we all live here together as a collective society. So the best way to be able to make that situation better is to look and research the stats and the facts and figure out how can you help this situation. What can you do in your community? You're not going to be able to make a difference in the entire world, but you can make a difference in your community. And if everybody makes a difference in the community, they can make a difference as a collective whole in the entire nation. So if you have any questions, or if you want to leave questions in the comments below, that would be great. Just make sure you put a big question mark, capitalize it, and a colon after that. That way I can recognize it and be able to answer those questions. Or if you want to DM me because you don't feel comfortable leaving a question in the comments below, just let me know, and I will definitely answer those privately as well. But yeah, there's been a lot of frequently asked questions since Monday, since this whole situation has happened. A lot of people are unfortunately taking notice about the riots and the looting, which Black Lives Matter does not agree with, and they do not have any support towards those people who are rioting and looting. But at the same time, you can't lose focus on what the main cause is and what the main message is being said here, and that is there is still racism and police brutality and excessive force and discrimination going on in our nation. And if we want these things to go away, or to at least be diminished, we need to take accountability for our actions, not only white people, Asian people, or Hispanics, but also to Black people in the Black community. Now that is another issue and another topic for another day, since I only have 25 minutes on here, but that's something I recognize not only in my family but also too in my community. Who knows what I would have ended up like if my mom kept us in the projects of Cleveland and not moved to the suburbs, to not only a great neighborhood but a great school system. Having education makes a huge difference in who you come up and who you grow to be as an adult. I do believe you are a product of your environment. But with that being said, accountability needs to be taken as an adult. If you commit a crime, you do need to have those consequences suffered to you, unfortunately. But if you do break the law, those are the consequences that you're going to have to suffer. But you can't lose focus on what the main cause is. So with the rioting and the looting, of course I do not agree with that, and I do not agree with stealing at all. but those things can be replaced. Lives cannot. George will never be back here on this earth ever again, and that was because of that police officer. And thankfully, with the technology that we have now, it was recorded and posted on social media and went viral, which is why we are in the situation that we're in now. The riots that are happening all across the nation, the protests and the looting, again, you can't lose focus on what the real message is. You have to remember to focus on the main cause, and although you might think you're helping and that your intentions are good when you post the damage and the looting, although that is what's going on, that's not the main thing that's going on right now. The majority of the people that are protesting are actually positive and peaceful, and it's actually, if you listen to the news, a different group of people that are coming in later on, which is why a lot of cities have been putting curfews on. I know some cities have been putting excessive curfews on a lot earlier. I've heard some cities having curfews at 1:30 p.m., which I don't think is right. I do think it is part of our freedom here in the nation to be able to protest about what we believe in, as long as it's peaceful. I do not agree with the looting or any of the damage, but those windows can be replaced. If it is a business, more than likely they have insurance, but that's not the issue. The issue is the fact that that police officer did something illegal, and the fact that he felt comfortable enough to do that, it questions a lot of people in this nation to have trust in police officers. And I love police officers, because if something were to happen and someone was to try to break in and steal into my home, they're the first person I'm going to call. So not all police officers are bad. That is definitely not the case here. But we are pointing out those bad apples that are in that group. So one of the things too that I will link on my Instagram page, since I can't comment and talk at the same time, but I will post other resources and other facts about what's been going on. But with this issue, it's very important to remain focused on the cause and the message, and to ignore the looting and the rioting, because those are not the people that are focusing on the message. They're not there for George Floyd. They are there for their own interests, and they are there for bad purposes, whatever that may be. And it sickens me to see that. It really does. But for me, I still see the message. It doesn't make me lose sight in what the real problem is, which is racism and discrimination and police brutality. So if you have questions, please leave a capital question mark with a colon in the beginning. That way I know that it is a question. I can see it right away while I'm talking. But if you have any other questions too that you want to ask me privately, you can always message me to my Instagram name. I'll put it in the comments below later on, and if you want to talk to me privately, that is okay too. I've had a few people already reach out to me privately to talk about this matter, just because they don't feel comfortable asking these questions publicly, because they're afraid they're going to get backlash. And although that is sad to me, there is reason why people are so defensive about this topic, because there's a lot of hurt and pain within the Black community and just all minorities going on right now. This isn't the first time that this has happened. For me, this is the first time I'm 27. This is the first time I've ever seen anything like this happen. And this is the first time I've ever seen on my social media pages where other races, white people, Asian people, are actually reaching out to me and wanting to know what the right thing is to do, wanting to get more information, and wanting to make changes in their life. And I'm hoping that this continues on and it doesn't just die down after a few weeks. This is something that isn't going to change overnight, unfortunately. I really wish it could. But because humans are so complex, and this is a tough issue to talk about. It's going to be hard work that we're going to have to put in, and it's going to have to be put in on everybody's part. Everybody's going to have to take accountability. It's not enough to be able to say that you are anti-racist and that you don't agree with people that make racist remarks. You have to be actively anti-racist. So what are you doing to help the situation? What are you doing to make sure that your family members are not saying racist things? What are you doing to enlighten them on the matter? What are you doing to give them a different perspective on what that person's point of view is? Why? Let them know why Black people are frustrated and why they are lashing out as they're writing and protesting in some of the ways. Let them know why they are peacefully protesting as well, and that majority are peacefully protesting. That is the thing here too, is that everybody's losing sight in the peaceful protests and focusing more on the looting and the rioting, and that is not the case. I know there has been the case that in Chicago there have been some crazy riots, and in other nations as well too, but you can't lose focus on the message. The message is to combat racism, police brutality, and discrimination. So I see a question here. How has participating in pageants helped you feel more empowered as a Black woman? So participating in pageants, how has that made me feel more empowered as a Black woman? To be honest, I wouldn't say pageants have made me feel more empowered. I would say it would be other Black women and Black men that are successful, not only within my community, but also within the nation. Seeing that has been very empowering, and I guess now seeing Miss USA and Miss Universe, that has also been very empowering. To see that has helped me to be able to imagine myself in those shoes and in those positions. So yeah, I would say seeing that, and then also seeing my family members, how they have overcome different situations, especially with my mom. She's been through many things in her life, and just seeing her being able to overcome those situations and raise wonderful children, it's empowered me to use my voice, use my platform, to get out and do more within my community, and hopefully across the nation. So what resources do you recommend to read and follow? So there's a few resources. I will put my Instagram name down in the comments below. It's going to be at Mariah_Danyale. If you go to my Instagram page, I've been posting a lot of resources and information on there, as well as in my stories. But I can also, once this live is over, I will leave some resources in the comments too for people to read up on, and different documentaries that they can watch that will shine a light on the situation and will be a good starting point for them to combat this issue that we have in our nation. But that's just the start of it. There's a few different steps that I will go into to help give an actual action plan on how to help this situation and combat racism, police brutality, and discrimination. Let me see what time it is. I'm not sure what time it is, but I think we have a few more minutes left, so let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, how do you feel about some of the negative comments that have been said by some pageant competitors / pageant parents about the Black Lives Matter movement and racism? I haven't seen those comments, but I'm sure they're probably very similar to some of the comments that I have seen on my Facebook pages and on my family and friends Facebook pages. It's hurtful, but at the same time, I'm not mad, because I see that they haven't been educated on the matter. So there's no reason for me to get angry or to yell at them. And it's not going to help the situation if I'm yelling at someone, because when you are yelling at someone and you're trying to explain it, they're not going to be able to hear what you're saying when you're yelling at them about a point that you're trying to make. So what you need to do, and this is very, very hard, I've had to practice this all of my life, but patience is key. I'm still learning that to this day, but also to being able to put your feet in their shoes to see where they're coming from. Although we're sick and tired of doing it, I know I am sick and tired of doing it, but in order for me to have family and friends that understand where I'm coming from, I need to be able to have the emotional intelligence and the patience to be able to speak on this matter. That way they are able to understand where I'm coming from and what the overall issue is here, because it is a complex situation and a complex conversation. It's not going to be a 5-minute conversation, because when you're talking about racism, you're talking about the history of the United States, which was over 200 years. So with racism. So with that, although we are seeing history repeat, history has been a huge blessing to me, more so as an adult than it was when I was a teenager. I absolutely hated history when I was a teenager. I did not understand why we needed to read on history, but having that history and now going back and understanding it, it makes sense why we needed to learn it, because we are able to look at that past history, look at those situations, not only to see what we did wrong, but what we needed to work on, but also to how to handle situations now. So let's see what other questions we have. Okay, there's a few of them. Hold on one moment. Are there any specific people you suggest we follow on social media who are putting out great information? Yes, there is. Did I write them down? So I know the NAACP, they're a great Instagram page to follow, as well as Black Lives Matter is a great Instagram page to follow. I will also link some down below too on who to follow in the comments below. Let's see, the population of Caucasians are higher in any minority group. Of course, more are killed. Sort of kind of like COVID-19 cases. Yes, Chris, that is very true. Okay. Sorry, as I'm looking through the comments to see the other questions. Can you explain the importance of education on the matter to help understand the perspective of the Black community? So what I think you mean by that comment, that question, can you explain the importance of education on the matter? Okay, so education is huge. I'm all about education. I'm the first one in my family to get a college degree, unfortunately, but education really is part of this. It's not all of it, but part of it, because also too it also depends on you're a product of your environment. So where were you raised? How are you raised, and what values and morals do you have? How can we educate ourselves? Okay, how can we educate ourselves? So I'll put my Instagram name down below at Mariah_Danyale. So I will post links here in the comments, but also too on my Instagram page. But to finish what I was saying, so education, I believe that is a big issue too as well, educating yourself on the matter. But education in general within those communities all over the nation makes a big difference on how you act in society and the things that you say and how you take things. For me, I'm not going to get that upset about someone's actions and the way they are towards me, because I know there's a different issue or underlying issue that they have. So with that, there's also too emotional intelligence that you need to have when you have these conversations. You can't just jump into these conversations with anger and just completely being defensive about the situation. You need to be able to listen. You need to be able to listen to the other person's perspective and to really care what they're talking about, even though you might have something that you're ready to say right after they are talking. Make sure you're listening to what they're saying and you calmly respond back. I know people are frustrated, so I get it. You know, you want to like yell back at them, but for me, a good conversation and a productive conversation is one that you can have back and forth. between two people or a few people, and there's actually a good dialogue going on between you and that other person. So let me see. Okay, 5 more minutes, I'm getting told. So if anybody else has any other questions, if not, I am going to respond back to the other questions either in my DMs or also on Facebook in my PMs, but I will also respond back to the resources that you can look up and educate yourselves on. I will leave those in the comments below. But I wanted to end on a positive note and on an action plan on how you can actually help this in our society with racism, police brutality, and discrimination. And one of the posts that I saw on Instagram, it was very enlightening, and I thought I would share it because I don't have something right now, but I do have something in the works that I want to be able to post and actually implement inside of our nation, but also too within my community. But one of the first things out of the 8 that I have here, one of the first things that you want to do when you have this conversation and when you're thinking about having a dialogue about racism, police brutality, or discrimination is understanding that there is optical allyship and what that is. So having an allyship is being able to recognize what the situation is and being able to post on that. I will also have more information on that on my Instagram page. 2 is to check in with your Black friends, your minority friends. How are they doing during this time? How is their family doing? How are your colleagues doing that are also part of the minority group? Because although this is a Black man that was killed, George Floyd, on Memorial Day, it is not just a Black issue. It's also going to be other minorities that are also Black and brown as well. So 3rd is be prepared to do the work. So what that looks like is going to be completely independent to each individual. So for me, I've been living my life as a Black woman, so I've seen the things and I've educated myself, not only at school but outside of school. My mom has taught me things, my father has taught me some things, but also too my family members just over the years. But mostly I got most educated on this matter when I was in college, and I took a black-white relations class, and this was probably the best class I've ever taken in my whole college career. It shed a light on a lot of things within the Black community that I didn't know about myself. Being in the Black community, that doesn't mean that we know everything about what goes on within the Black community in terms of racism and poverty and crime and all of that. So this class gave me a different perspective on not only my people but also to family members and myself. So 3rd, being prepared to do the work, because you're probably going to need a therapist for this whole situation, because it's not a light topic. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of people, including myself, but it's something that we need to talk about and something that needs to be done in order for us to address this issue. In order for us to combat this, we need to recognize that it exists, and then how are we going to do the work for that? So 4th is read up on ways to actively be an anti-racist person. So what are you doing to be actively anti-racist? So if you're against racism, that's great, but that's not enough anymore. What you need to do is to be actively anti-racist. So if you have friends that are Black, oh, but I have a Black friend, oh, but I have a Black girlfriend, that doesn't mean anything at all. Because you can have a Black girlfriend and say racist things and not think you're a racist, but although you use the N-word or you say a racist comment, that means that your actions are racist. So whether or not you're a racist, your actions are, and that's something you need to take accountability for. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be very uncomfortable to be able to say that about yourself or to recognize that, but it's called accountability, and we all need to take accountability for our actions. And a lot of people have opened up and have been honest to me about it, so that's a really great thing. 5 is avoid sharing content that is traumatic. So although your intentions might be good, if you are posting constantly only about how you're sad that there is damage to broken windows or a business or a locally owned business, whatever, or the riots or the looting, I get it. I totally get it. I am upset my city in Cleveland is destroyed, almost, not completely, but all those things can be replaced. Lives can't. So make sure that when you're posting positive things about George Floyd, and you're posting positive things about the cause and the message. That way we can focus on the message and not about the people that are looting, because majority of the people that are protesting are not the people that are looting. There's a completely different crowd that comes in, which is why we have a curfew here in Cleveland that starts at 8 p.m. because there's a different crowd that comes in for the peaceful protests versus the people that come in for looting and for their own interests, and it has nothing to do with the cause and nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, and I don't support them, and neither do other black people that have their head on their shoulders. So donate to a fund and groups that support Black Lives Matter or any other minority groups. So that's number 6. So if you really want to help the situation and you're not just posting random facts and stats on how white people are doing this, white people are doing that, you're not necessarily helping the cause. You're just posting random facts, and then you're more than likely going to get into a Facebook or Instagram or social media argument. So you need to make sure that you're putting your money where your mouth is and donate. So 7, do not center this narrative around you. So what that means is, although you might be offended, the facts are the facts, and the history in our country is that we have been systematically suppressing black people and minorities for decades, centuries almost. And it is an uncomfortable situation. It really, really is, and I can't express that enough, because when you are uncomfortable and you're not going to want to be vulnerable. And in order to have this conversation, you need to be able to open yourself up and to be vulnerable, to have a constructive conversation on this matter. So making sure that you're not making this about you. If you're not a black person, do not make this about you. I do see people making it about them. Well, what about me? I did not do that to your ancestors. I know you didn't do it to the ancestors, but you need to be able to make sure that you're helping the situation and not making things worse by arguing on Facebook and on Instagram. You need to make sure that you're not making this narrative around you. So 8, I'm going to end with this one. Keep supporting these messages after this outrage is over. So although there are still people protesting and outrage all over social media currently as I speak, it is important that when all that does start to simmer down, which it will, that we keep this message going, and we keep this message loud and clear that we need to end racism, and we need to end police brutality, and we need to stop discrimination, not just with black people, but also to brown people, other minority groups. So that means Native Americans, Indians, Latinas, they're all part of the same group. So that's what I'm gonna end with. All right, guys, if you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments below, or feel free to message me privately if you don't feel comfortable leaving a question in the comments. My Instagram page is at Mariah_Danyale. So that's MARIAH_DANYALE. All right, have a great day, and thank you so much for this time. Bye.